This epiphyte growing on a tree in my garden was my first target to identify and overcome my plant blindness. You can discover what is plant blindness in the video entitled "Which is the Pomelo? Plant Blindness and Identifying Plants as a Cure," for which there is a link provided in the description section. It was difficult to know how to begin identification from the 12,000 or so fern species which are present. I resorted to some technology by using plant identification apps which I downloaded on my phone. Before I start mentioning the names that popped up on my phone app, I have to tell you that I have no idea of how the names should be pronounced, and am just taking a stab at it. PlantNet identified the species as Davallia solida with 94% confidence. LeafSnap and iNaturalist also mentioned Davallia solida as a possible identity, so I am leaning towards this identity. But since a few other names came up as well, I also looked into them. One of the characteristics used to identify ferns is their reproductive structures. Luckily, at the time I was trying to identify the fern, it had reproductive structures present, that is the sori, which house the sporangia and spores. Sori may differ in whether they are naked or protected by a thin membrane called the indusium, or occur under the marginal flaps as false indusia. The garden sample I was trying to identify had a true indusium. The appearance of the sori and indusium indicated that amongst the possibilities obtained from the plant identification apps, the garden sample was likely to be a Davallia species. Davallia has a characteristic pouch-shaped indusium near the blade margins. The sori and indusia of the other species differed. That is, Asplenium had a linear arrangement of sori, while Remora and Polysticum had round indusia. Identification from within the Davallia genus required other plant characteristics such as the appearance of the frond, rhizome, and scales. Although all three apps indicated Davallia solida as a possible identity of the garden species, it had to be eliminated. The scales of the garden species were toothed, while the scales of the Davallia solida were hair-like. The indusia of the garden species were broad, while the indusia of the Davallia solida was long, and the lamina extended into teeth beyond the sorus in the garden species, which is not seen in Davallia solida. The other Davallia species brought up by the plant identification app was Davallia bullata, but this species is said to be found mainly in Japan and China, and since my home is in Malaysia, I'm going to presume the specimen I have is not Davallia bullata. I would have preferred more information before I jumped to my conclusion, but there was very little information on Davallia bullata online. Some researchers have considered it a unique species, while others have said it is a synonym for Davallia marasi, Davallia trichomonoides, and alternatively Davallia cylindrica. Confusing. But anyway, another piece of evidence that eliminated Davallia bullata as being the garden species was its reddish-brown scales on the tender stem, which is linear. I did not find this on the garden sample. Since the Davallia species suggested as the identity by the phone apps were eliminated, I decided to look for literature on Davallia species found in Malaysia and compare the species found in my garden with those recorded to be present in Malaysia. Of the Davallia species known to be present in Malaysia, the frond structure of Davallia angustata, Davallia heterophylla, and Davallia triphylla eliminated them as being the garden species. In addition, the indusial shape of these species, as well as Davallia pectinata and Davallia hymenophyloides, eliminated all of these species as the garden species. Another 4 species found in Malaysia, Davallia corniculata, Davallia vestita, Davallia parvula, and Davallia rapens, were also eliminated as the possible species in my garden. They were reported to have a white waxy layer on the rhizome, which was absent in the species in my garden. Finally, I was left with 5 possibilities. and differentiating them unfortunately needed a more detailed study with a microscope. Davallia divaricata, Davallia dimorpha, and Davallia embolostagia lacked false veins and would probably not be the garden species, while Davallia trichomanoides is reported to have veins in the sterile ultimate lobe not reaching the margin, unlike the garden sample. This left Davallia denticulata as the species in my garden. However, more characteristics would have to be studied for more definitive identification. But based on the frond, indusia, sori, rhizome, and scales, I believe what I have is Davallia denticulata. I also have a little less plant blindness. I have also provided some references you could get online in case you want to make a more detailed study into the characteristics of the ferns, in particular Davallia. If you have anything to add to the identification of Davallia denticulata, do leave your input in the comment section. Thank you for watching the video. If you found it useful to walk through the characteristics that make Davallia denticulata a Davallia denticulata, do like the video and subscribe to move on to getting to know other plants found in Malaysia.